Hello, fabulous friends and fans. Welcome to this FAQ video. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. This video is about recognizing fertility and adoption and children and childbirth in a chart. So someone anonymously asked me, like, can you determine whether or not I'm going to have physical children, or am I going to adopt? Or will there be any kids at all? And actually, there are ways to look at this, okay? So there are a few strong significators you want to see. Now, I'm going to share this while also saying all else being equal, because there can be a lot of different nuances that, especially for an astrologer, the more experienced you get, the more charts you look at, the more you're able to more fully understand the symbol, especially when there's, for example, if you are a student of astrology, a lot of different aspects taking place. All of that is going to speak to your judgment. So that's what the ancients called it. When you say this is going to happen, when you make that prediction, what you are doing is you are making a judgment. There are a few factors you want to look at in terms of fertility and all this stuff. So the most important, I think, and especially in the chart of a woman, the most important is the moon and aspects to the moon in the natal chart, and also major aspects to that moon as well. That's first. And then you want to look at what's happening with the fifth house cusp, the sign on the fifth house cusp, very important. The ruling planet of the fifth house, where is it in a chart? What kind of aspects is it making? You want to also look at the fourth house also, because the fourth house, and sometimes, some astrologers also consider the 10th house as well. I don't as much. I do think that, and especially if you're looking at you or your client becoming a parent, it's a lot more about what's happening with the moon. Sometimes, especially for the male, a man, the sun, the fourth house and the fifth house cusp, okay? But the fifth house is more important than the fourth, but they're both important. So let's break it down. The moon in a woman's chart. The moon, and even let's say the fifth house cusp, right? The planet, what planets are in there, what sign they're in. It's much more likely that whether by transit or whether by in the natal chart, there are certain signs that are more strongly associated with things like a physical, biological occurrence than others. So, for example, a sign like Scorpio, a sign like Cancer, right? These, and to a certain extent, Pisces as well, but we'll talk about Pisces in a moment. If you have a moon in one of these signs, and also when you're looking at the cusp of the fifth house, one of these signs, and the earth signs as well, in particular, the likelihood of a biological connection to a child is more likely. However, different aspects can come along and can be game changers. If the moon or the fifth house cusp, but let's start with the moon, right? If the moon is in a sign like Capricorn, and even Pisces to a certain extent, it becomes a little bit of a different thing. It becomes, like we could say, I look at that and I think that becomes about the legacy, right? The name. And for a person with a Capricorn moon, having that physical legacy becomes that much more important. So the water signs in general, especially the sign of Scorpio, and the earth signs in general, speak more strongly to a physical birth than some other signs might. So whether that's on the 5th house cusp or the sign of the moon. But of course, you also want to look at what planets are aspecting that moon. So let's say you have a moon and it's, in Scorpio, right? So that's a very strong sign. But it's squaring Uranus. Let's say it's a really tight square, right? Because what we call the orb, if the orb is really close, so both planets are in signs of the same modality, and the degree number is very close, that makes the orb of that particular conversation that much more meaningful, and especially when it comes to a personal planet like the moon. In any given chart, the big three are the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. So that's sort of like one of the first things you learn as you start to learn astrology. One of the first things people like to look at is, where your sun is, okay, where's your moon, where's your ascendant? And also I know when I meet other people, other astrologers at astrology events, that's what we ask ourselves. Where's your sun, where's your moon, where's your ascendant? So, and of course, if you're talking to astrologers, they're also going to throw in the degrees as well, what numbers as well. It's always fun. It's like, oh, my Mercury is there. Oh, my Venus is right there too. Oh, like that kind of thing. You got to come out to an astrological event. But having said that, so if that moon is speaking to Uranus in opposition or square, then that person is likely going to have some, and especially a woman, some mixed feelings about being a mom. Even with the sun as well. If the sun is in a square or opposition or even a conjunction, okay, that person may have some mixed feelings around being a parent. And this becomes especially true if that moon or that sun is in an air sign, okay? Because air signs in general like freedom. Again, generally speaking, air signs like freedom. And then you add the element of an opposition or conjunction or square of Uranus, then that person is going to insist on their freedom. They may still become parents, okay? Some strong aspect might come along by one of those very fertile types of planets, okay? For example, the progressed Venus conjuncts the moon. And let's say at the same time, there's a very strong harmonious conversation of Pluto to the moon as well. And let's say also, for example, that the ruling planet of the 5th house, let's say the 5th house, on the cusp of the 5th house, is a water sign or an earth sign, and the ruling planet is also getting some like very nurturing kind of energy, right? Like the feminine kind of energy. Or progressed moon is moving towards it. All of that, you have to like put it all together, and that helps you to understand if that is the chart of someone who's going to have a physical birth. But also, the great thing is with the air signs as well, and with other signs out there also, but I think the air signs, especially moon in Pisces as well, and sometimes the moon in Sagittarius, I've seen this as well. It can kind of go either way, okay? Because Sagittarius is such a strong sign of truth, and it also likes a lot of freedom as well. And so the sign of Sagittarius can really decide if it's going to be about, it's got to be a physical thing, or not having kids at all. And sort of adopting from different cultures and things like that. Also very possible with someone with a Sagittarius moon. Having said that, I remember I have a friend, I had a conversation with her not too long ago, and she was 40 years old when she adopted her now adult daughter. And she thought she couldn't have children. She was 40, so she adopted. And then a few years later, at like 44, she got pregnant, like by shock and surprise, and she had a son, and who now also was an adult. Both were in their 20s, well into their 20s. And I remember I asked her, like, have you ever felt a difference between, you know, the two of them? And her reply was, oh, my moon is in Aquarius. They're exactly the same for me. They've been exactly the same. They're my kids. And that's how it tends to be with someone, particularly if you've got a moon in an air sign. It is that it tends not to make that big a difference, like whether the child is adopted or is a physical child. So, for example, right now, we have Pluto slowly moving through the sign of Capricorn. Let's say someone has a Capricorn moon. So they are at some point, either they have or they will have a conjunction of Pluto to that moon. When Pluto conjuncts your moon, really the big lesson is you have no power, you have no choice. Regardless of how that particular moon is aspected, it's kind of like fate has its own will and it takes you on its own journey. And so those people right now, it very much will either be that, you know, okay, yes, this is going to happen, this has to happen, and they have a physical child, or they come to a place where they may realize that that they don't have power over this and they wish that they could. That person, now, all else being equal, right? Let's say that person, it would be negated a lot if that person had harmonious aspects of other planets to that moon. However, all else being equal, someone with a Capricorn moon is less likely to necessarily want to adopt. Now again, as I said, all else being equal, if there are harmonious conversations taking place with planets in Sagittarius, let's say, right? There's some strong Sagittarian energy, strong Jupiterian energy. There might be some very harmonious Uranus energy as well, harmonious Neptunian energy as well. That could negate that significantly. That person would be more willing to adopt. But all else being equal, in general, a person with a Capricorn moon is not going to be as inclined to adopt as someone with a moon in an air sign, for example. Now, the fifth house, the sign on the fifth house also says a lot. And the aspects that are taking place. Now, what's really interesting to me about this is that you want to see what's happening with the moon, yes, but also what is happening in terms of the fifth house and the fifth house ruler, especially in cases, because there are cases where people, you know, they ask like, will we be able to have a child? You know, is there any kind of medical treatment? Should we spend this money to have, you know, I have those kind of questions sometimes, like, you know, should I spend this money for these infertility treatments or not? And so there are a few things that indicate that, whether or not that's a good way to go. And one of those things is like, what is Saturn doing, right? How is Saturn aspecting the ruler of, transiting Saturn, that is, aspecting the ruler of the fifth house, and from where as well, very important to look at. Because, for example, let's say you've got the ruler of the fifth house is Mercury, right? Let's say you have Gemini on the cusp of the fifth house. The ruler is Mercury, okay? And Mercury is in your sixth house in your chart, okay? And let's say that you are approaching, Saturn is now in your eighth house. Saturn is in a sign that is a water sign or an earth sign in particular. But Saturn being in the eighth house, sextiling the ruler of the fifth house, that is a good time to go like sort of the traditional route, to consider like deeper examinations and for something like fertility treatments, Again, all else being equal. If you have, let's say you've got that Mercury also, and transiting Uranus is going to be coming along and making a trine to that that particular Mercury, and let's say it's a trine from, for example, the first house, because the first house is like really about physicality, right? It's about your vitality as well, and the sixth house is about like medical, care and treatments. So that's going to be like the experimental, right? The quick happening, hearing about something, having a certain treatment done. If you have Sagittarius or Pisces on that fifth house cusp, then it could be that for you, you end up doing something like, I have a friend who has something similar like that in her chart. And what she did, right, she had this desire to have a child. She was too old. She was older and in a place where she was not going to physically have a child anymore. And so she decided to go to a foreign country and work in an orphanage, be part of building this orphanage, and worked there for like 5-6 years, was part of the success building this whole organization. And so she got to spend time with children every day. Like that was her job, to be with children, to care for them, but also to think about how to better serve them and to serve people in need, and how to empower new moms who maybe don't have as many resources. So she felt that she was surrounded by children, she was surrounded by love, and she was able to give herself that experience. She had some very strong Sagittarian themes in her chart though. So because of that, that represented this element of foreign countries, and also that element of freedom as well, having and being able to have some detachment also. So she could have that experience and nurture that part of herself. And at the same time, it wasn't about, waiting until they're teenagers, right? Because some people really don't, like, they love the idea of having kids, but the idea of having teenagers becomes a whole other thing. And then there are people who, they're not crazy about babies, they're not crazy about little kids, but they like the idea of someone growing, intellectually and physically, and being able to talk to them more and more and more. Now, I do want to talk about Saturn, because Saturn can represent restrictions, okay? It's really important, I think, as an astrologer, to empower people. You want to, of course, respect the tradition. You want to honor the symbol, of course. But at the same time, you also want to see what is possible, because I don't think it's ever really like no, closed and shut. Yes, sometimes it will be very obvious. You'll see the chart. There'll be a lot of very clear symbols that a physical birth is very unlikely at this time. For example, let's say Pluto is conjunct the moon and it's in hard aspect to some other planets in the chart, major planets in the chart. Let's say it's squaring Neptune in the chart, for example. And at the same time, maybe like Saturn is, having some hard aspects to the ruler of the fifth house as well. Like all these things, and particularly you're seeing like very strong air energy that is of the fifth house, and still it's being very hard aspected. When you see things like that, it becomes more obvious that the likelihood of a physical birth is not as strong as the possibility of adoption might be, or at least not for that given moment and that given time. And so I do think that, of course, you want to have integrity and respect for the symbol, and at the same time, you want to empower the client, and you want to be honest as well. I remember not that long ago, I had a client come to me and say that, they've been told already they cannot have children. Like it's just not going to happen. And they've kind of come to an acceptance of it, but they just want me to confirm that that's the case. And I looked at the chart and I saw like there was all this Scorpio energy and all this. There was some Capricorn as well, Scorpio energy, Cancer energy as well there, harmonious aspects coming up. And I looked at that and I was like, you know, that looks really strong for a physical birth, really strong. And so I empowered them with strategies. I empowered them with, I saw, okay, who's the one more likely to, you know, to reach out for any kind of assistance or help or insights or whatever changes need to be made to make that a higher probability. What are the strategies? Who should utilize the strategies? The female or the male? So all of these become factors as well. I do also want to say with like same-sex couples, a lot of times adopt as well. And sometimes I have been asked as well, like, you know, where should I go in the world? And is this something I should do? You know, I really think there are symbols in a chart that speak very strongly to connection with certain places, especially. And so you want to honor that, right? If somebody's got like a strong, again, Sagittarian themes, if you have Sagittarius, the sign of Sagittarius is on the IC of the chart. Home, and what feels like home, what feels like family, is likely going to be in a foreign land than that of your ancestors. And the same is true for moon in Sagittarius as well. You are going to find home in a foreign land, that much more likely. The same becomes true also with someone who's got like a very strongly placed, positively placed Jupiter in the 9th house. Okay, so if you have somebody who comes and they know that they have to adopt and they want some guidance of which way to go, then you want to look at the 5th house cusp, yes, but you're also going to look at the 11th house cusp in that case. And if someone really is not sure if they'll be able to have physical children, they want to know, am I going to have physical or am I going to adopt? Look at what's happening natally in the 11th houses. Look at what's happening natally to the rulers of the 5th and the 11th house also. And then look at what's happening by transit to those rulers and also within those houses as well. Because that ultimately is going to allow them to have a sense of timing, have a sense of strategy, and have a way of going forward as well. As you better come to understand the different archetypes and how it is that these energies blend together, you're able to be a little bit more precise on things. Finally, friends and fans, I want to say that where it comes to physical birth, where it comes to adoption, sometimes the answer you give, you might think is you know, going to disappoint people, but might not actually be. And so it is important to consider this person, their perspective, their point of view, and to consider what it is that they're sharing with you, but also the chart itself, right? That will always tell you, give you some powerful glimpses into what does this person actually want. And sometimes, right, people will ask you this, you know, fertility, can I have children or not, stuff, because they really don't want children. Like they might ask you that so that you can like confirm to them that they're okay and it's no problem, they can go off their pill now or something. So honor the symbol always, first and foremost, honor the symbol. And as a general rule, if it is, you know, an energy that you can touch, that you can feel, that reaches right into you, like water, like earth, that represents physical connection. Energy more strongly associated with something like air is that mental connection, that connection on the level of ideas. And energy that has to do with fire. Now, I actually think Aries and Leo, those energies, I mean, Leo really likes to be a parent. And fire generally is associated with blood, honestly, right? And so you want to watch if there's strong themes playing out in either of those signs, because that also can relate to a physical connection. You also want to watch, again, like nothing is absolute. The sign of Virgo is also a sign of caring, and it is a sign of service as well. So someone with strong Virgo energies, it might be more about being of service in terms of children. And if they're coming at it from that place, it'll be a different energy playing out. And that will suggest, again, whether or not it's physical or it is an adoption as well. And as I said, Sagittarius really, I mean, a Sagittarius moon can find home and family in foreigners and in foreign places. So people like that, it is more likely than not that they would be comfortable and that they would likely move in the direction of adoption. So consider the sign, consider the energy, get to know the archetypes, like on a level of feeling, because the entire universe, you're part of the entire universe, and the whole universe is within you. You participate in the unfolding of the universe, as do your clients as well. So ultimately, you want to be honest, you want to be clear, you want to see those indications, and at the same time, you want to ensure that you are opening their mind to possibilities. All right, friends and fans, I will stop there. Thank you so much for this moment with you. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, thumbs up. I'm truly so grateful for it. And I love interacting with you guys. Facebook, Twitter, Google+, my website, nadiyashah.com, and the YouTube comments as well. Thank you so much again. Until we connect again, take care.